We are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another segment of the Real Michael Pittman Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pittman, and joining us on the show today is Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, aka the Money Coach. Lynnette has done so many different things throughout the years and has a very extensive resume. She's a New York Times bestseller, has written 16 books. Her New York Times bestseller was called Zero Debt: The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. She's appeared on Oprah. She's been on Good Morning America, The Today Show, Black Enterprise Magazine, Essence, USA. Oh my goodness, just too many to name. So she is a powerhouse in the financial industry. And first of all, I thank her for agreeing to come on our little show, just to talk about and enlighten our audience about the importance of finances and credit and college debt. It's just so much that she's going to impart upon us today. So, Lynn, first of all, thank you for agreeing to be a part of the show.
Mike, it's my pleasure. And it's not just a little show. You're doing big things here. I always tell people, if you're talking to an audience of 1, 10, 100, or millions, you're having the opportunity to change lives. So I was happy to accept the interview request and was looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, well, thank you, Lynette. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to dive in here. I mean, there's just so much that we can talk about, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to dive in. Can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know I just kind of hit the small topics. I know you're based in Houston, Texas, and kind of a little bit, just a few minutes about your career in terms of where you got to where you're at now.
Sure. So I own and operate a financial education company called the moneycoach.net LLC with my husband, Earl Cox. And yeah, we've been here in Houston for the last 5 years. We came here from New Jersey in 2019. I'm from Los Angeles. My husband's from the Bronx. We met in New Jersey, and we were out there for many years. But then we moved here pre-pandemic. And our oldest daughter went to college out here before we even moved to Texas. She went to University of Texas at Austin. We have a son. She's 26 now. She's already graduated, of course. Our son is 24, and he graduated from North Carolina State University in Raleigh. And Earl and I, our youngest, Alexis, is 18, so she's graduating on May the 31st.
Oh,
wow. Sometimes people say, oh, she was on Oprah, she wrote books, she did this and that, she's a real estate investor, she does it. All of that is true. But really, I'm most happy about the fact that we've been able to raise 3 successful kids, happy, right, normal, well-adjusted kids. And we're like, oh, wow, we're kind of at the finish line here. We did it. These kids, So Alexis is going to be going off to college. I know before we went live, you were telling me about your son who went to Prairie View. And Alexis was accepted at Prairie View, actually chosen as a Regent Merit Scholar, full ride. She turned down Prairie View. As tempting as it was, and she's going to another HBCU, so she's going to North Carolina A&T in Greensboro, and she's been chosen as a Power 4 fellow there. Great scholarship and great research opportunities for her, and she wants to go to law school. So on the work front, I call myself a money coach because I teach people about personal finances and how to better manage their money. And I just love talking to people about all things related to money management, whether that's credit, debt, paying for college, since I've been through it, coming up on now, this is the 3rd time. I just kind of teach based on my own background as a financial journalist, because I was a financial reporter for many years. I worked for the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones Newswires. I worked for Fox, the 10 o'clock news in Philadelphia. I worked for CNBC. I was a correspondent on air there, etc. And so I just always learned about asking people questions all the time. And because I like to talk, it was not difficult for me. And, from an educational standpoint as well, this is where I had my background in training. So I went to UC Irvine undergrad. That's where I got my degree in English. And then I went to USC in Los Angeles, and I got a master's degree in broadcast journalism. I never thought that I would be using my journalism skills ultimately as an entrepreneur, because I was just seeing a path in media and staying in media. And I was in media for many years until I wasn't, until I got fired, you know?
Oh.
So, hey, this is truth telling time, you know?
Looked like they did you a favor though, too.
They did me a big favor.
Uh-huh.
So I was a Wall Street Journal reporter for CNBC, and I got laid off. Not just me, 200 other people also. We got laid off during one of the earlier waves of downsizing in the media. It's going on a lot right now as well. But long story short, it pushed me into entrepreneurship. And so it turned out to be a huge blessing in disguise, because now, it's been 21 years that I've had my company. So it worked out just great. I'm definitely not complaining. But I have a passion like you for real estate, for wealth management, for talking to Black folks in particular about how it is that we can improve our net worth and the things that we can do to close the wealth gap, et cetera. And so, I guess family, finance, put them all together. Those, two of my biggest passions. I love travel. I'm really big into health and wealth, and the links between the two now. Again, my husband and I have been on our own journey in that the last 3 years in a big way. And, I guess everything is kind of connected, it's all related.
Yeah, when you talk about the health, I mean, I was tell people, I've been a vegetarian for about 25 years, but over the last year and a half, I really got into it even more so, to the tune I've dropped about 53 pounds.
Wow.
And basically just really, understanding now about processed foods and sugar and things of that nature that I thought I knew so much about, which I really didn't know at all. So now that I've educated myself on that, I've had several shows that I've done with people that are, pretty well versed in in this particular industry. So it means a lot when you recognize that and you're able to impart that knowledge and wisdom upon others, just kind of what you're doing in the finance end as well. So I applaud you and your husband both for that, because, we really, especially as Black people, our health, is probably the worst. We probably have the worst diets of any nationality of people in this country.
I cannot say enough about this. I don't know if you want to give me a couple more minutes to talk about this. This is definitely one of my passions. So let me just share something with your audience, and obviously with you, since it's the first time we get to do this interview, right? So many years ago, before I married my husband Earl, I was vegetarian also at one point, right? But honestly, I didn't know what I was doing either. I was just, I called myself, I was like, okay, I'm not going to eat meat. I'm not going to eat beef. I'm not going to eat chicken. I'm not going to eat poultry or pork, etc. But I really wasn't, I had no idea about macros and nutrients, about, healthy fats, carbohydrates, proteins. I mean, I was doing so many things wrong. Okay. But anyway, fast forward, I got married. Earl and I, it's a second marriage for us both. And we were together happy in what we call bigly. Bigly. We was both big. We was both big, Put it like this, Mike. It's not cute for you as a woman, meaning me, myself, of course, when you're 5'6" and your husband is 6'3" and you weigh the same weight. And that weight is starting with a 2. I'll tell you the exact number because I'm not ashamed to say it. It was 250.
Wow.
That's not good. So what had happened was in 2021, my husband was diagnosed with AFib, with atrial fibrillation. It's an irregular heartbeat. It can cause a heart attack or stroke. Unfortunately, his mom had had a stroke, and she passed away in 2018. His biological father, he had a a stroke also. He passed away in 2021. Earl's grandfather had a stroke. He passed away. So obviously we knew this was very serious and to take this serious.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked the doctor, what do we need to do? And they were like, yeah, you got to make some lifestyle modifications. You got to change, this is going to be hard. We can do some surgical procedures to help, but really you need to do a number of things. You need to lose weight. You need to stop doing the things that can trigger AFib. So Earl and I got serious, got on our health and fitness grind. I lost 85 pounds.
Wow.
He lost 65 pounds.
Wow.
And all of the things that we learned that were triggers, especially in the Black community, things like obesity, he was able to tackle that. Alcohol is a trigger. So he literally just went cold turkey and stopped. He's not had a sip of alcohol ever since. And neither have I. So he was like, well, you don't have AFib, you could drink. I was like, nope, I'm just gonna, to support. I want to do it also. So no alcohol. He used to drink a lot of coffee, like 5 cups of black coffee a day. He completely cut out coffee because caffeine is also a trigger. So no chocolate cake and all that kind of stuff for him. Nothing chocolate because, again, caffeine. And we just, again, decided to get serious. We started reading a whole bunch, Harvard, public health, the Kaiser Foundation, Cleveland Clinic, et cetera, trusted, legitimate health sources. And we started studying up on nutrition and on what we should be doing. We started going to a rash of doctors. We were like, okay, you know what? We're going to do this. Let's do it right. So, for everything from cardiovascular specialists to neurologists to obviously our primary care physicians, our dentists, skin doctor, just everything, just, really trying to optimize our health. So I'll summarize my part to say this, because I'm really super happy about this. So I told you I lost this 85 pounds and I'm looking good. Like, I just tell people, look, I'm 55. I look good to be 55. Okay. So, but for some reason, my cholesterol was still high. I was like, what is going on here? My mom has high cholesterol. My older sister has high cholesterol. Of course, when I dropped the weight, they were like, oh, my doctor was telling me you're going to be able to not take this medicine, which is what they had told me to take, atorvastatin. And so it's supposed to, lower your cholesterol. So I take the medicine. I really didn't want to take the medicine, but I took the medicine because I was like, okay, this is not good to have high cholesterol. And my cholesterol was consistently like 220, 230, 240. Your cholesterol is supposed to be a healthy range is below 200. So I was like, why is my cholesterol so high? Even after I adapted my diet and, we're out there walking or running. I run a lot and I walk a lot. Like today I did 6 miles. And, I took the medicine for like a year. My cholesterol was still high. I was like, I dropped all this weight. What's going on? My doctor said, oh, you need to increase the dose. We increased the dose from 20 milligrams to 40 milligrams of this atorvastatin. I take it for another year. It still is doing nothing. So in March of 2024, I had my blood work done. It showed, it was on March 19th, March 22nd, I got the results. My cholesterol was 230. I was like, this is bonkers. What? Something is wrong. I know this is, honestly, I kind of think that most of it is what we eat, So I was like, I eat so clean. I exercise. So what's going on here? I talked to a friend of mine who's a nutritionist and who's getting a master's in public health. And she knows, my nutrition and the fact that I exercise a lot, et cetera. And she said, let me drill down a little bit more about what you're eating. So I was, I told her. Then she said, oh, I know what the problem is. She said, you're missing an entire food group. And I was like, what? She said, whole grains. She was like, yeah, you kind of go light on the carbohydrates but you're missing whole grains in your diet. And that can be, you need the soluble fiber from that. And that can be elevating your cholesterol. And she said, trust me, I did this with my mom. She said, let me tell you what to do. She was like, eat a bowl of oatmeal in the morning, every day, eat a bowl of oatmeal, just, one serving. And I was like, that's it. I was like, that's it. She was like, well, I'd like you to eat 2 servings of whole grains every day. It could be brown rice, it could be toast. And I eat a certain kind of toast called Ezekiel bread. So I was like, that's it. She was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, these carbs. Okay. I was like, as long as my weight don't go up, I'll work out harder if I have to, but I'll do what I got to do. Because I was like, I don't care about the weight as much as I care about being healthy. And I wanted to be off of the medicines. I do what she tells me for 6 weeks. I got my blood work back. My cholesterol was 184.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I literally saw my cardiologist today. He lowered my dosage from the 40 to the 20, and we're going to test again in about 2 more months. And then he's like, you're doing great. And I just want to take you off gradually. But next step, you just get to eliminate it. So wow. I was like, oh my gosh, sometimes you have, personalized nutrition, and you have something that's a little more custom for you. And this friend, shout out to Raina Gobel, who's the person who told me this, who has a course called Best Nutrition Class Ever. She's the one who really said, yeah, it's the whole grains. And she was so right, wow. So anyway, now I'm super happy about that. I'm just looking forward to just seeing the numbers keep dropping a little bit more. That was just after 6 weeks,
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about cardiologists. I'll be on the call this night about 7:00 with a cardiologist, black cardiologist in Houston named Baxter Montgomery. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Wow. No, I should take down the name though too. Okay.
Yeah. And he's probably one of the few doctors in the entire, in the country, and he's right there in Houston as well, that treats all of his patients with plant-based diets. He even has a restaurant within his facility where you can buy the food, you can go in and get stuff. And he is remarkable. I mean, I've talked to him, and just to listen to some of the things that he's done, I'll say this real quick, but I know he talked about this lady that came to see him. She was 89 years old, was taking 22 medications, had been on insulin for 50 years. And after being with him about 3 days, he was able to get her off of insulin. Now, this was a lady who had been on insulin for 50 years and eventually get her off all her medications. She's 94 years old now, takes no medications at all. And there's a lot of stuff out there. He has a show he does or whatever, but I'll be on a call with him tonight at 7:00. And
I'm definitely going to look him up. So you said Baxter Montgomery?
Dr. Baxter Montgomery.
Okay.
He's right there in the Houston area.
Oh, I'm gonna be Googling finding him for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, he's very interesting. Very good too. So yeah, most definitely. But I just enjoyed that health conversation because I get excited when I hear people almost like an epiphany where you say, man, I get it now. And I know exactly what it is that I need to do. And, to be able to impart that knowledge among your family members and others, in terms of, we talk about, the sicknesses, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the cancers, and all these particular things that, that we suffer with. And a lot of it is a result of the foods that, in my opinion, the foods that we put in our body, the processed foods, the sugars, the oils, a lot of that in excess, I believe. So kudos to you and your husband both for being able to do that. That in itself is a very inspiring story to be able to tell that. So
for sure. I can say one other, just a closing note on that, on the health front. You know how they say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, So my mom, who is 80, came out here from Georgia. She's been staying with us. We planned for her to stay with us for 4 months, and it's almost the end of that 4 months. She needed knee replacement surgery. She got the knee replacement surgery out here. She's doing great. But because she also has adapted the nutrition habits and the food and the lifestyle that she dropped 20 pounds, my sister Cheryl came out here and stayed with us for a minute, just over the holidays, just because we wanted to have family around and whatnot. we said, Cheryl, just stay with us for 30 days and do what we're doing. She dropped weight as well and
Wow.
has continued on that path. So sometimes, it's contagious in a good way, right?
Mm-hmm,
When you start
mm-hmm.
practicing healthy habits. And again, you don't have to like beat people up over the head about what they're doing. Because I'm gonna tell you, I was the worst of the worst. And that's why I say I don't shame people. I don't
Mm-hmm.
put people down for their choices. I just tell them what's worked for me and what, I share the knowledge
Right.
that I've learned along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And they say YMMV, your mileage may vary, but
Oh,
but the idea is absolutely that like I fast every Monday,
mm-hmm.
without exception. We do intermittent fasting just on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, some of these concepts, if people are like, oh, wow, they get introduced to them. If they get past a little hurdle of trying it, it's like they'll see, often I think how much better they feel. So
Okay.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm happy
yeah.
to share
Yeah,
about that.
you're 55. I'll be 65 coming up here in a couple of months. So it's needless to say, it works. It definitely works. So my goodness, we could do a story just on the health part of it, on the whole thing. So that is, man, I'm just so even more excited now to talk with you about how this all parlays. Because if you don't have good health, you can't even spend the money if you have it.
It's
So
not even worth. It's if
yeah.
you don't have your health, it's none of the money. All that's not worth nothing.
Mhm.
So
Right. Yeah. But talking about wealth and wealth and those things, and particularly in the Black community, I know in your book, in one of the books that you wrote, you talked about how you were $100,000 in credit card debt, $40,000 in loans, whatever, and you eliminated all of that. What was the process that you used in order to do something like that, and how can you impart that same wisdom and knowledge upon our listeners? I know it's discipline. You got to have some form of discipline to be able to do that.
yes, so I dug myself out of credit card debt in about 3 years. My
Mm,
student loan debt, that was the other one, the 40,000. And honestly,
okay.
it took me well over 10 years to pay that off because I had it
Mm,
on like minimum payments. I was kind of like set it and forget it, which was a
mm,
mistake. So really when I dug myself out of the debt and then I wrote this book about it that you mentioned, Zero Debt, it became a New York Times bestseller. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have a plan. I wasn't like, oh, let me create some master, 5-step plan to be able to get out of debt. I was just doing things that I was seeing, were effective and that were doable and realistic and achievable. But I layered all of the steps. You get a multiplicative effect. It's kind of like a snowball effect. When you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, it's going to be more powerful, right? Than if you just did one thing. So I did a host of strategies and I outlined them in Zero Debt. In fact, I wrote Zero Debt as a 30-day action plan to help people to jumpstart their finances and dig themselves out of debt. I'm not promising, of course, you're going to be out of debt in 30 days. Obviously, that's not going to be realistic for most people. But I am telling you, day 1, do this. Day 2, do that. Day 3. So I give people one step, just one thing to do each day. So it boils down to there's things like opting out of getting additional credit card offers. So because sometimes when you're already swimming deep in debt, you just don't need that extra temptation. Especially if you haven't learned how to manage credit card debt wisely, you're just going to be adding to your debt. I know you think, I'm not saying that it can't be smart to do like a balance transfer strategy to get a 0% offer, especially right now in this high interest rate environment, right? Where you have, 22+% interest rates. That's the average for
mm,
credit cards. So
mm,
it could be smart to do a balance transfer. No question about it. Get a 0% deal, take that deal for 12 months or 15 or 18 months, and then you won't be paying the interest, right? And
mhm.
so you will be able to more quickly pay off that debt. But the problem comes in when people just get the 0% offer, they do the balance transfer, and then they go back and charge up on that same old card. They charge the debt right back up again, right? So,
Mhm.
but opting out, negotiating with creditors, I was able to get all of my interest rates down low. And again, this was 20 years ago, but you can still, the concept still is absolutely valid. You can get your interest rates lowered. I picked up the phone and asked, I negotiated, and at the time, my highest interest rate was 4.9%. I was able to get 2.9%, 0%. And the reason is that I was a good payer. Even though I was, in massive amounts of debt, I was making payments on time, minimum payments. And so the banks were like, "Oh, good, she a customer. We don't want to lose her, because if she goes somewhere else, that's just going to be interest we're going to lose. So let's, lower that interest rate if we have to." I started doubling and tripling the payments. So I learned that minimum payments in the short run, even though it might feel good, you might be like, "Oh, I'm saving," or "I got cash flow," etc. That's really going to be maximum payments in the long run. So the more aggressively, the more quickly you want to get out of debt, you got to chip away at that. I did things like using windfalls. So a windfall is a lump sum of money outside of your, kind of normal paycheck. So if you get a year-end bonus, if you get, gift money, holiday money, if you get a insurance settlement, a divorce proceeds, IRS tax refund check, all of that, you take that lump sum, you sock it towards the credit card debt. You're not going to be sad that you eliminated some debt. You're going to feel good about that, right? So I used a variety of strategies. And of course, I had to rejigger the budget. And for me, it really meant like having a budget in the first place. Because before, I would just, when I wanted something, this was in my first marriage, again, I would just whip out the credit card. If I wanted it, I just charged it, whatever he wanted, etc. And without being mindful of how to properly leverage credit and debt and how to use credit wisely, to not exceed a 25 or 30% threshold in terms of your available credit limits. You really do want to keep your credit limits low. But because I've done, all these things over the last 20 years to really master, honestly, the art of using credit wisely, managing debt the right way, etc. My credit scores are always great. I was profiled on CNBC. This is a funny story, even though I got fired from CNBC, right? 20 years ago. Well, 20 years later, they profiled me, did a whole big piece about me having a perfect 850 FICO score.
Wow.
And so, talk about full circle moment, right? But you have to know kind of like the credit scoring game. So one of my books is literally called Perfect Credit, 7 Steps to a Great Credit Rating. So I teach people about how to achieve what I call perfect credit, to put yourself in that perfect credit scoring range, which is a 760 to 850 FICO or Vantage score. So, so it's, I did a whole bunch of strategies is what I'm saying. It wasn't just like one thing that, that got me out of debt.
Yeah. And you talked about the credit scoring or whatever. I know there were 3 different credit bureaus, whether TransUnion,
Experian. That's right.
Now, when they rate you on your credit, I know there are different scoring models that each one of them uses in terms of, how they come about, getting you a score. And you talked about your utilization, 25, 30%. And I know just having a payment history definitely helps too in terms of paying your bills on time. What are some other things that you would recommend? I know you talked about the 7 steps to be able, and I don't want to spoil it because I want people to buy your book too.
That's okay. We'll give them as much as possible. We'll tell them all. So first, one of the main things to understand in order to have perfect credit is you have to understand the credit scoring formula and how it works. And really, whether or not it's the FICO scoring model or the Vantage scoring model, it's very, very similar. So it's pretty much the same thing in terms of the elements that go into your credit score, or what comprises your credit score. So you need to understand, you mentioned the bureaus. So yes, they're called the big 3: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Those 3 credit bureaus got together, I don't know, 15 years ago, or I can't remember how long it's been. And they came up with their own credit scoring model, right? So at first, FICO was like, what you doing? It was competition for them, right? But they came up with the Vantage score, which is the Vantage credit score. And again, it's on the same credit scoring range up to 850 in terms of the maximum. So those type of things are similar. But generally speaking, let me just tell your audience kind of very quickly here why it is important to understand the components and what goes into that credit score. Because once you do, that tells you the things that you should do and not do in order to have a great credit rating. So number one, 35% of your credit score is based on your payment track record. In other words, how well are you paying your bills? Are you paying everything on time? You never want to miss a payment, because if you miss one payment, a single missed payment can drop your credit score by 100 points or more.
100 points. Wow.
Yeah. So rule number one, don't miss any payments. Pay everything on time. Again, I encourage people to pay double, even triple if they can, if you trying to dig yourself out of debt, minimum payments. It's not going to be possible for everybody. I don't care if you could pay $5, $25, whatever, pay something extra. But even if you're just like, I'm so broke, I can't even pay that, at least pay the minimum payments to make sure that you're paying on time so that you don't get a ding on your credit report, which translates into a lowering of your credit score. So 35% is the payment history. 30% is the amount of debt that you're carrying. 30% of your FICO score is going to be based on the amount of debt that you're carrying. People get all worked up. They're like, oh my God, I got a lot of student loans. I got a big mortgage, my car note. Don't worry about all that. It's your credit card debt. The credit scoring models are very, very sensitive to your credit card debt. And it's for a whole host of reasons that I won't get into right now. But just trust and believe. Knock down that credit card debt, you're going to see those credit scores rise. So really be careful about that, because 30% of your credit score is based on the amount of debt you're carrying. Then 15% of your score is based on the length of your credit history. The longer and more established your credit history, the more that tends to boost your credit score. So, sometimes people are like, I'm closing this account out. Okay, well, you just closed out your credit history on that account, right? So sometimes you might want to actually leave an account open, even if you just charge on it once in a while and then just pay it off in full, just a nominal little, $50, $30 or whatever on there, because you're keeping a longer credit history open for the credit bureaus and the credit scoring system to evaluate you. The last two areas are both 10%. So 10% of your credit score is based on the type of credit that's in your credit files, or the mix of credit that's shown in your credit files. So you could have mortgage debt. Obviously, you got a home loan, you got a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. You have a investment property, with a mortgage on it, etc. A standard, a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit or a primary mortgage. Those are all just in the mortgage category. Then you could have installment loans. So installment loans are things like student loans, auto loans, right? And that's another category of debt. And when they're looking at your mix of credit that's shown in your credit files. Then credit cards, that's the third on the totem pole. That's the lowest of the credit. So mortgage debt is the higher, quote unquote, better debt, right? I always tell people that all debt is not created equally. So that credit card debt is lowest on the totem pole. Remember, I told you that that's the most sensitive in the credit scoring model. So that credit card debt is called revolving debt or revolving credit. And it's revolving because you could constantly charge up. It's very different than your mortgage or your car note. You pay off you paying on your mortgage. They know, okay, it's due on the 10th of the month. Your payment is $2,000 a month. I'm just making it up. Your payment is $2,000 a month. You're going to pay $2,000 on the 10th or by the 10th of each month. And your balance is going to keep going down little by little. Most of it is in the early years is towards the interest, but that principal will get knocked down. Well, with a credit card, it's different because your payment might be due on the 10th and you might pay it on the 10th, but you might pay minimum payment. You might pay the balance in full. You might pay half of the entire balance. So they never really know exactly how much you're going to pay. They could, do some analytics and see your payment history, but you could pay pretty much anything you want. You can pay the minimum payment or above, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the case that with that credit card, you can charge up again. So you're not going and generally adding to the mortgage. Yes, you could take out a HELOC, and that could be a different thing. But again, you're paying off your student loans, for example. You're paying off your auto loan. You're not getting more debt on the auto loan or more debt on the student loan, generally speaking, from what you originally borrowed. Those balances as you pay, they're just coming down. But it's revolving with your credit card, because you could be like, I'm about to go travel. I'm about to go buy a new suit. I'm about to get a flat screen TV, right? So that makes it riskier, which is part of the reason why it's more harshly judged in the credit scoring world. But overall, having that mix of credit, mortgage debt, installment loans, revolving credit, the credit scoring system rewards you when you show that you have multiple forms of debt / credit in your credit files, and that you're responsibly juggling all of that. So they're like, okay, brownie points. She got a mortgage, she got a car loan, she got a credit card, she got maybe a student loan or a student loan she paid off. I'm gonna give her points for that. So that's 10% of your credit score. And then the final 10% of your credit score is based on inquiries or new applications for credit. My bottom line advice here is that you need to know that an inquiry, a hard pull of your credit when you're seeking a credit or a loan, not a soft pull, not when you check your own credit rating. That's called a soft pull. That does not affect your credit at all. You should do that all the time, as much as you want. And the bureaus are offering that right now. You can get a credit report free every week if you want right now. But that 10% that's based on inquiries, if you do a hard inquiry seeking credit or a loan, then your credit will be impacted, because that hard inquiry stays on your credit report for 2 years, and it counts against you for the purpose of your FICO score calculation for 1 year, for 12 months. So I tell people, look, only apply for credit when you really and truly need it. Don't be walking in the store, you in Macy's or something, and a nice lady behind the counter is like, oh, you're buying a dress, you want to get 10% off, and you buying $150 dress, and you thinking, oh, I'm gonna get $15 off, I'm gonna pay $135 instead of $150. But oh, wait a minute, you trying to get a mortgage next month. Now that inquiry, you just dropped your credit score 12 points, and you might be affecting your mortgage interest rate. You get it? So it's more important to jealously guard your credit rating, be very judicious about when you take credit. Just because somebody offering you credit don't mean you should take it, So learn to say no to some of that stuff. So those 5 areas: payment history, 35%, amount of debt you're carrying, 30%, the length of your credit history, 15%, the mix of credit that's in your files, 10%, and then the final 10%, new applications for credit or inquiries. All of that is what comprises your credit score, and it tells you what's going to determine whether or not you have, a really excellent credit rating, or whether your credit rating is suffering because you've kind of missed the mark on one of those areas.
Wow. Let's pivot a little bit, Lynette, and talk about home ownership in terms of a way to build wealth, particularly in the Black community. I know we historically have been shut out, of that particular market, in the 40s and the 30s and 40s, in terms of individuals coming back home from the war and not being able to get those GI loans like the whites were able to get. And then, they kind of started it didn't start it, but it increased the cycle in terms of the gap, in wealth. How important is that now? And what are some of the ways or particular type of investments that you would say, outside of even owning your own home, from the real estate standpoint? Could you speak to some of that?
Sure. Well, I wrote about in Vox, I wrote about my family's own history and about how my dad was in the military, and he's in his 80s now. He's in his early 80s. And yeah, when he came back, he was not afforded. This was in New York. He was not afforded the opportunity to use a GI Bill and to be able to start the process of wealth building by having the government insure the mortgage loans like the white guys were able to get. All of Levittown in New York, the whole middle class was built there
Mm-hmm.
because the government subsidized it, but definitely not for Black folks. So I write about that, and the fact that I did not become a homeowner until I was in my 20s, and I lived in apartments my entire life. And I think from a standpoint of why home ownership is important. First of all, in America, about 70% of the average person's net worth is tied to their home, tied to home equity. So when you're locked out of the home ownership game, it's really hard to build wealth. I'm not saying that you can't do it through other means, and we'll talk about that. But certainly, I look at this house that I'm sitting in right now. I told you that I moved from, New Jersey to the suburbs of Houston in 2019. We bought this house, and I'm a person who always talks numbers and money, so I don't have any problem saying this. We bought this house, which was like, 2 or 3 times the size of our old house in New Jersey, right? We bought this house for $442,000. The house is almost 4,000 square feet. It's a 5-bedroom, 5-bath house. They're building the new ones now for almost $800,000. Okay. So equity appreciation is a massive thing when it comes to being able to generate and build wealth. And people need to understand equity is something that you can tap, you can leverage. To have several hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equity means that if I wanted to, I could tap equity to pay for my kids, her college bill when she goes off to college in August. I could pull out money for my business if I wanted to, funding for my business, right? I can make investments. I can buy other investment properties, etc. So yes, home ownership is crucial to wealth building. Having your primary residence is not the only one, and especially not for Black folks, because I think that given the wealth gap and the fact that the typical white family has about 8 times the net worth as does the average Black family, we have to think strategically, and we have to do some other things. We got to get creative about how we're going to play catch up and how we're going to, move the needle. In our family, one of the ways that we've decided to play catch up and to, kind of like go against the grain, I guess, is by buying our kids their first homes, because we see that it's almost impossible for today's, late millennial Gen Zer to be able to buy a first home. Truth be told, for a lot of Black folks who are not even just 20 somethings, 30 something, 40, 50 something, 60s, they can't afford to buy given high interest rates, rising prices, etc. NAR, the National Association of Realtors, comes out with their annual data, a report on home ownership, and they talked about first-time home buyers. And I'm, just paraphrasing the gist of the data. For 2023, I believe it was only 3% of only 3% of first-time home buyers in 2023 were Black.
3%. Wow. Dismal number.
Dismal. And guess what? That was cut in half from the year before. The year before, it was like 6%. So we're not trending the right way. I'm gonna see what 2024 numbers are saying, and I'm a little scared to see what it's gonna say, because I know that increasingly a lot of folks have been getting priced out of certain markets, right? So some people, though, may choose not to become a homeowner, or that the economics may not work given a whole bunch of other things going on in their life. They might be ready to relocate. They might be going off to grad school. They might be getting married. They might be going out of the country. They might be just have other interests and priorities, etc. I think that property ownership is something that everybody should look at and consider. And even if you personally don't want to be a homeowner, perhaps because you want to be free and have a little more flexibility, etc., and because the rent versus buy calculus in some cities is not necessarily quote unquote worth it, at least not from a standpoint of monthly payments, etc. Equity appreciation, that's always a gamble. You don't know unless you buy into a relatively stable and or growing, healthy and or hot even market. But maybe you don't have to own as your primary residence, but maybe you can invest in real estate in other ways. So you were asking about other means. You can invest in rental properties, right? You can flip houses. You can buy REITs, real estate investment trusts, to get a little piece of what's happening in the real estate market. You can look at other asset classes. You can certainly think about equities or stocks, fixed income securities or bonds. You could have a portion, an allocation to crypto. You might check out mutual funds. I have all of those, all of that I just named. I got all of them, So, but my husband and I have heavily invested in real estate, heavily in the stock market too, and I'm honestly heavily in crypto as well. But number one is in terms of the bulk of what we've invested in and how we've strategized for our own retirement. You told me that you're 65, and I told you I'm 55. My husband is 60. So as we contemplate, retirement, et cetera, we love the idea of having these streams of income because we own 8 properties. So yeah, that's, I guess that's the answer to the question about invest in everything, buy assets, buy old assets,
When we talked about, I want to talk about some of the ways I guess we've gotten robbed of wealth in the real estate market, primarily as it relates to appraisal of Black-owned homes. I know there have been several articles and lawsuits that have occurred recently about those disparities. I think it was a couple. I believe they were out in California that they had their house appraised and appraised at like $500,000, and they got somebody white to sit in for them. Then the house appraised at like $800,000 more. Can you speak to that just a little bit, Lynette?
Absolutely. So in my latest book, Bounce Back, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Resilience, I talk about overcoming a lot of setbacks and adversities. I call these the dreaded Ds. It's 10 of them: downsizing, divorce, death in the family, disability, disease, dollar deficits, debt, damaged credit, and things like discrimination. So I share in Bounce Back my own housing story of appraisal bias and appraisal discrimination. And bottom line, when I lived in New Jersey, I lived in a white area. White appraiser came out there. 95% of appraisers are white males. Guy came out there. I knew it was going to be a problem. He gave me an appraisal. It was like $100,000 less than everybody. I was like, no, this is what we're not going to do today. So we got a second person came out there, and, and the number came in right. But this is an absolute real problem, and it's called appraisal bias. And whether or not it's Black people who live in white communities getting a lower appraisal, or whether or not it's entire Black neighborhoods being undervalued, this regrettable, sickening phenomena saps the Black community of wealth and the opportunity to create wealth and to, as I mentioned before, have greater amounts of equity. If somebody's telling you your house is worth $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 less than it really is, that's taking money out of your pocket, out of your kids' pocket, out of your future. So the industry actually knows that this is a problem. The appraisal industry, the Appraisal Industry Institute, I believe is the name of the organization. They have launched an effort to retrain, to get more appraisers of color, to diversify their ranks, etc. And even beyond what they're doing, at the federal level, the Biden administration has put in place some new rules to really try to address this. And one of them, I know most people are shocked to hear this, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing because I'm not, obviously I don't have any speaking role for the Biden administration, but the gist of it is through like Fannie and Freddie, GSEs, the government sponsored entities, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The bottom line is that they're like, yeah, you don't really need an appraisal. Some people are like, what? Like, how we not need an appraisal? They're allowing you to do substitute things in some instances. It's a whole bunch of other things that they can use to evaluate a home's value, from sort of desktop and drive-by appraisals to somebody just electronically. Like, the appraiser don't need to come, the person don't need to see that you're Black or who owns it. They could just take pictures using technology. So there's doing other things to try to mitigate and eliminate this phenomenal appraisal bias. But yeah, it's sad that in the year of our Lord 2024 that this is still going on. But it absolutely is a thing.
Yeah, and there's so many horror stories about that. I have a personal story about that. Probably, say 20 years ago. My wife and I, we built a home in this exclusive subdivision here in Springfield Golf Course community. And I remember, we drew up our plans. We had our plans drawn up by a draftsman. Took the plans to the bank, a lender, and they looked at it and had an appraiser look at the plans and we were building that and said, okay, based upon this, we're going to loan you 80% of this particular, what we feel the cost is, the home will be worth, which was enough for us to do the construction loan and to get everything done. So when we got finished with the house, the bank wanted to send an appraiser out to make sure that everything was done according to the plans. And we actually did even more. We put in a circle driveway. We put in a sprinkler system. We finished a basement area in the house. So we even did more than what the plans called for. But when we got the appraisal back, it was $85,000 less than what the first appraisal was. Totally. And I just remember just going to the bank and say, you know what? I said, I'm not paying for this. I said, this doesn't make any sense at all. And I just laid it on the line. I say, now they find out it's a Black, because I had to meet the appraiser at the house. And I say, now they see a Black person on the house, and all of a sudden it's worth $85,000 less than what it was before we even started. And we put probably even more money in it than what the initial plans were. So the bank, they canceled the appraiser and they had somebody else go out and we got the number that we needed to get. But just the mere fact that you had to go through that, and then even selling your homes. I remember reading in the book Earl Graves wrote. I used to go to Black Enterprise conferences every year. And he wrote a book called How to Succeed in Business Without Being White. And in this book, he wrote about him and his wife had a beautiful home. I believe it was in New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been New Jersey, upstate New York. And how they were trying to sell their house for 6 or 7 months. Couldn't get the house sold, so somebody told him, hey, you know what? You got to de-black your house. He said, what do you mean by that? He said, you got to take down all the pictures. You take down anything that has any hint of ethnicity, and you make your house, basically make it look white, bland and plain. And he said he did that, and they sold their house within like 30 days. And my wife and I had the same thing happen to us too when we had our first home. It was a really nice little bungalow house, and we were proud of it, and we put it on the market. It's on the market for 2 months, couldn't get it sold. So I had a friend of mine who had just recently sold his house, and he told me the same thing. He said, take down all your pictures. I went to the store and bought picture frames, to have white people in the picture frames. I put them out. I got rid of the Ebony magazine, the Jet magazine, the Essence magazine, put out Popular Mechanics, Better Homes and Garden, put the hot sauce bottles up, hid everything. And we sold our house. We sold our house in 2 weeks. So
ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's real. And it's one of those things that, it's like the elephant in the room. Nobody really wants to talk about it. But at the end of the day, like you're saying, it's the wealth stealer for our community in terms of, if it's $100,000, $200,000 that you're not getting now, especially if you're able to leverage that, to the tune, if I got $100,000 equity and the bank's going to loan me $80,000 of that, well, that $80,000 can go towards buying a vacation home, pay for my kids' college, buy a Winnebago home and travel around the country, whatever it is that you want to do. So when we start looking at that, in terms of a wealth stealer, there really needs to be an emphasis put on that in terms of how we combat that. Because especially if there's nothing wrong with the houses are nice. Probably about 20 years ago, too, we built a subdivision here in Springfield of homes. And now when we built that subdivision, it was in a predominantly Black area of town, an area that, no white people wanted to move into. But here, 20 years later, that's one of the nicest subdivisions in town. Several people have paid their houses off. I got a text yesterday from a guy who said he just sold his house, for twice the amount of money that he paid for it, and the house is paid for. He's sitting on several $100,000 right now, and he's happy about it. But the mere fact that even when we did that project, the houses were just as nice that you would see anywhere else, but they try to lowball the prices on them. So this is very crucial information that people need to be made aware of, and don't take just because they get an appraisal. Don't take it. If you know your house is worth more, you got to stand up, you got to speak up, or get your own number, get your own comps before you meet with the appraiser. And now you can justify and say, hey, wait a minute, this house is similar to mine. It's in the tract. This house is similar to mine. It's in the tract. Why is my house only worth $60,000 less? And I got more square footage. My house is newer. So, and if you don't know how to do that or have that knowledge, they just stealing money from you, unfortunately.
You know what, Mike? So I mentioned Bounce Back when I talked about discrimination, and I shared that story of us having appraisal discrimination. We had the exact same experience that your friend had and that you and your wife ultimately had. When the second appraiser came out to us, it was a black guy. We were like, oh, we were shocked because again, we'd never seen a black appraiser. It's always some white guy coming out. So he was like, let me tell you what to do. We were like, well, he said, take that down. So over our mantelpiece in the fireplace, over the mantle, we had big, a portrait of our family, my husband and I with our 3 kids. He was like, take that down, take down all the pictures, take that. And we were like, what? And then he was like, yeah, just take it down. My husband was livid. He was hot. And I was like, honey, let's go have a talk. Let's go talk about this. So we went to the side. He was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be denying my, he was rightfully so. Right. Mm-hmm. So I said, let's get the deal done. This is the game. We see what's going on. The man is basically peeping us, telling us, like, yeah, they're not going to question it. They're not going to say it. The numbers are what the numbers are. So when the first guy came out, I did, because I'm a person who does research. I had my comps ready. I knew what the other homes in the, that were comparable square footage, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, etc. So when I saw that number, I was like, oh no, he way off, and this ain't going to stand. So anyway, we did. They call it making your house neutral. That's what they call it, making your house race neutral or neutral. Like you said, bland, like, no flavor to it, I guess. But it's just like, so we took the pictures down. We did it, we, begrudgingly. And of course, yeah, then the number came back 100-something thousand more, the right number that we wanted and needed. And we kept it moving. But we were like, this is a shame. But I want to share with your audience that on my free financial advice site, which is askthemoneycoach.com, if you go to that site and just search in the toolbar, because I have over 1,600 articles on that site, if just type in appraisal bias or how to deal with appraisal bias, because I wrote a long article and I give a number of strategies for how to deal with that. So anybody who's a homeowner or who's going to buy a property, there's a variety of strategies, including one that I call place 2 bets. Like now I don't mess around with these banks and these appraisers. I always have 2 mortgages or 2 appraisals going. Because if somebody's going to mess me up in the end, I'm not going to have my deal slowed down or kind of falter at the table because of some crappy appraisal. So yeah. So, it's a little bit more time and a little bit more money, $300 or $400 more, but it's worth it in the end to not have to, So anyway, but I give a number of strategies. You talked about having a stand-in, So my house here, I live in, like I said, in the suburbs of Houston. My daughter lives in Austin, and it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes away. Her and her husband is white. So we were like, oh, we might have to have Jacob one time to come here. So we kind of joked about it, but yeah, but it's, it's a real thing, and it's kind of crazy, but yeah, there's some strategies and some ways to kind of, get around it, or it shouldn't have to be that we shouldn't have to do all of this, but unfortunately that's where we are.
Yeah. They call it the black tax, I guess, that we have to pay or whatever. One of the things that we did too when we did our subdivision, we started our own mortgage company because we knew that there were going to be some issues as related to that. And this was during the subprime market. We were mortgage brokers, so we had about 85 different lenders throughout the country that we could work with. And, so depending on what your store was and what our deal was even then was the fact that we tried to find individuals we knew that could make a monthly payment that were renting. And we put the numbers in front of them and say, well, listen, I know you got less than perfect credit, but if you're paying $1,300 a month for renting and we can get you in a brand new house and you own it for $1,200 a month, even if it's $1,300, your money ahead, because what will happen is that if you can stay in that house for at least a year, get your credit intact, now you can turn around and refinance that house, drop your payment down, and every time you're making a payment, you build an equity in that property. And we were able to do that. And again, now here 20 years later,
that's awesome.
Individuals that own their homes now, own them outright, or retirement age now, and they got an asset if they want to leave it to their kids or they want to sell it, move somewhere else. So, that was probably one of the biggest things and best things I think what we've done to be able to make sure our people own things, own houses, even if it's investment property or whatever. So
that's amazing.
It's a crucial.
You still have that mortgage company?
No, we shut it down. We ran for probably about 3.5 years. Then the market started changing, and a lot of the subprime lenders. And we were a subprime lender, but we were definitely making sure that we weren't ripping off people. Some of the subprime lenders, they were charging anywhere from 8 to 9 points to close a loan.
Ridiculous.
I mean, just ridiculous stuff that it's like, no, we're going to charge you 2 points. No more than 3 points, and if, depending on who the lender was, they might pay us 2 points on the back end, but it was really greedy and it took advantage of our people a lot in terms they were paying these high interest rates. On top of that, they were, it was just ridiculous. That was back when you're getting 100, 125% loan to values or whatever.
Those ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. Just got a post. They just sign you up,
Yeah, and we had a couple lenders like that. One out in Long Beach, California. That if you were breathing at the time of closing, now you might not be breathing afterwards, but you were breathing at the time of closing, you could actually get a loan from this company. So that was that was
the criteria.
Yeah. I just got a couple more questions. I'm really enjoying this interview, and I know you got to run because you have a hard stop, but when you talk about being debt-free and being free by being debt-free, what does that mean, I guess, in terms of to have that freedom, to be debt-free and not owe anybody else nothing except to love them, I guess?
Exactly. Well, sometimes people ask me, is it really possible? Can you just owe nobody nothing? Yes, it's possible. But first, you should know the statistics. I can tell you I'm the research queen. I like to always, tell people. So researchers at Pew in Washington, D.C., they basically said, listen, like 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 Americans owe somebody something. Everybody's in debt. They owe a car loan, a student loan, a credit card, a mortgage, got some buy now, pay later. They got a payday loan. They owe their mama, sister, something. They owe somebody something. So sometimes when people ask me to define, sometimes people are talking about zero debt. Like when I wrote the book, Zero Debt, I was talking about getting out of credit card debt. I was specifically focused on that because that's a massive problem. Obviously, right now we have $1.1 trillion in consumer debt and credit card debt. It's a record level right now. So sometimes people are just like, just let me get rid of these credit card bills because I can breathe. That's one thing. Then obviously another level is I don't owe anybody anything. Like if you pay off your mortgages, if you pay off your auto loan, your student loans and other obligations. I'm of the mindset, I don't mind having mortgages. I like to use leverage. I like to use, OPM, other people's money. And so to me, it's just a wealth generation tool. It's a strategy. But the thing that I tell people is that, because sometimes people go, oh, because that's good debt and bad debt, a mortgage is good debt or a student loan is good debt. And I'm like, well, not exactly, because any debt, in my opinion, any form of debt can become bad debt. It can become bad debt if it's excessive and if you don't have a plan for how you're going to pay it off. So,
Mm.
so if you might be like, oh yeah, I'm buying these properties and maybe they're not cash flowing right, or you're putting more money into them, or the repairs are up, through the roof, or it's not building equity, it's in a flat market or declining, etc. You got to think twice about if that's a smart strategy to have the debt on top of all of that.
Mm.
So, overall for me, zero debt is more like a mindset and a philosophy. It's a lifestyle to kind of keep you honest, to keep you from excessively living above your means. And most of the time when I'm talking about zero debt, I'm mostly talking about, taking care of your consumer debts. But, again, different people may have different definitions, and I respect it either way, but I just, for me, like I said, I've got my mortgages, and, several of our properties, a couple of them have very, very small mortgages left, like 40 something thousand. So a very modest amount left. All of them have tremendous amounts of equity in them. Um,
Mm.
so, you know, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Just two more questions, Lynette. I know you got to run, but I want to talk about how we leverage our dollars as a Black community. We talk about the $1 trillion that we have in our pockets, if you will, but we spend 98% of those dollars outside our community. What are some ways that you would recommend, if you can, in terms of how we can leverage those dollars to be able to create more wealth in the Black community?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Mike. I appreciate the question. It's worth me staying on here longer for that. Absolutely, recycling Black dollars within the Black community through intentionality, meaning that when possible, and it's far more possible than most people think if you're just willing to make a teeny bit of effort. When possible, try to be intentional about paying a Black business owner for the service or product that you need. I'm not asking you to go with somebody who has substandard, who doesn't deliver good quality. No, it's find a good one for whatever it is that you want and pay that person. If it's not possible, okay, it's not possible for whatever the thing is that you need, and you can go with somebody else. That's fine. But if you just adopt that mindset, like even when I'm looking for, we started off talking about the healthcare industry and about the health and fitness journey that my husband and I have been on. My husband knows what my mindset is, and he was actually first looking for me for different specialists, medical specialists. He was like, okay, I know she gonna want a Black doctor. I know she want and I got a Black doctor. She want my primary care physician. So it's just trying to create wealth within the Black community is not just about us patronizing businesses that are owned by other Black folks, although that's very, very helpful. It's extremely helpful. But it's also about advocacy. It's about teaching. It's about, spreading the knowledge. It's about support. Because sometimes, you know what, you might not have to spend $1. Can you make a referral? Can you tell somebody on social media? Can you put them in touch with somebody in a network that can be beneficial to them? So there's other ways that you can amplify and uplift Black business owners and, in turn, support what they're doing collectively in, various Black communities throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
So don't always think that it has to be like, oh, okay, I didn't, they have a restaurant and I didn't, go and patronize them. Although if you're going to be eating out and if oh, great, I like this food, go do it, So there's out in here, for example, there's a restaurant in Katy, Texas, which is, close to where I live, about 20 minutes away. And it's called Astor Farm to Market. And the owner is a South African, a brother named Casey. And honestly, anytime we can, when we go out, when we eat, when family come in town, when it's a special occasion, when it was my daughter's sweet 16, when it was my mother came in, just everything, when we try to go out, where we're going to go? We're going to go to Casey's. We're going to go to Astor Farm to Market. Not only because the food is amazing and the customer experience is just totally over the top and very warm and inviting. It's anybody who comes in there, they feel like home. But it is because we're being intentional to support another Black business owner. So just kind of keeping that top of mind. You just don't know how much you could be, helping somebody get through to make payroll, to support their staff, to, to keep a vibrant business going in the community.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head when you said being intentional about it. I keep going back to the subdivision that we built. And I remember when we first started the subdivision, talked about the subdivision, I got a call from a white lady who's a realtor. And again, this is no indictment against white people at all. I just want to make sure I help out people. And she wanted to be the exclusive real estate agent for this subdivision. And I say, man, with all due respect, I say, I look like a fool to give you all these houses to sell. And we got Black realtors here in town that don't get an opportunity to sell houses like this. Now, if you're so sure you can sell them, these are going to be the realtors that are going to get the listing and you can sell their listing, but I'm not going to let you have all these listings. And on top of that, when we had a Black roofing contractor with the company that I own, we had a Black electrical contractor, Black painter, Black landscaper, Black excavator, we Black drywaller, Black insurance companies. We put a lot of money in Black people's hands because I understood the importance of being able to circulate those dollars within our community. And it worked out well. None of the work was subpar, and everybody, we're going to give it to you if you can't do the work. And we went out and we found these individuals that didn't get an opportunity to go out and build homes or do work in exclusive areas because the mere fact is that, well, their work's going to be subpar. And these homes to this day are some of the nicest homes in Springfield. And a lot of Black hands went into building those homes. So it also, too, it creates a legacy. Because now you can drive by there or your grandchildren can go say, my grandpa, he did all the siding, he did all the roofing, he painted all those houses, he did all the plumbing, he did all the tile in all those houses. So that's how you start to create some pride also within your community, and not to mention the community itself, because now it's a neighborhood of role models. Whereby you got people that are taking care of their homes. And I remember all the negative talk we got. They're going to tear them up. They're going to be the ghetto in 5 years, all this negative talk. And now, again, it's one of the nicest subdivisions in town. So, Lynette, I know that you got to go. But I really have enjoyed this. I want to bring you back on the show again. And when I do come to Houston, I might look you up. My wife and I, maybe we can go out to a nice place to eat. I'm sure you know one that we could go out to and eat. And just, I'd like you to meet my son as well. I know one of my son's clients owns the Breakfast Club. I think it's a place there in Houston. And, it's a Black restaurant, that they do a lot of business or whatever too. So, Lynette, do you have any last minute thoughts that you'd like to impart upon us before we end the conversation? Because I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and just the ability to share with your audience and for extending your platform to me. I guess the only thing I would really share is a message of hope and inspiration to just tell folks, no matter what you're going through. And I understand. And I mentioned Bounce Back for a reason when I talked about those 10 dreaded Ds. I've been through 9 of the 10 dreaded Ds. When I talk about divorce, downsizing, death in the family, disability, all that stuff, and discrimination. So I just want people to feel like somebody cares and somebody else knows, what you're going through. And that, all of this is a journey, a little bit, step by step. You don't have to fix everything all at once. It's just a little bit of progress, a little bit at a time. But, and I tell people all the time, they can hit my free advice site, askthemoneycoach.com, because it'll answer, because a lot of people have questions. They're always like, oh, I would like to get some more information. Just go on my site. It's free. And you can read every article and all kind of, you'll see videos and just things that'll be helpful to them.
Yeah. Lynette, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Again, we want to have you back on the show in the future, in the not too distant future, on top of that, to talk a little bit more about just some of the things that you've imparted upon us today. So, folks, you've been listening to Lynnette Khalfani-Cox. AskTheMoneyCoach.com is our website. Go to that site, and there's tons of free information that you can get that'll help empower you, as well as put you on the road to financial freedom, as well as building wealth. So thank you all for watching and listening to us today. And that's our show. Thank you.